So the theme of the conference is Coach Me Happy, and what could possibly make your clients happier than solving their problems? What could possibly make you happier than solving your problems? And you might think as a coach, actually what my clients that are happiest is helping them to achieve their goals and things that they want in life. But I would say, well, we don't miss what we've never had. But the problems are here today, they are real and they are in the here and now. And the problems that people encounter are what's stopping them from achieving those goals or those aspirations or those changes that they want to make in life. So actually, helping people to solve their problems is a very important thing to do. And yet, paradoxically, as a coach, how many of you think that as a coach it's your job to help people solve their problems? Yeah? So some yes, some no. I would say in the strictest definition of a coach, it's not your job to help people solve problems. However, if you don't, that will prevent you from doing what your job is, which is helping people to what? How would you define the job of a coach?
Help people explore the choices that are available to them.
Okay, exploring choices that are available.
To thrive.
To thrive, yes. Progress.
Unlock their potential, right?
Yeah, unlock potential. So if there's something that's going to stop us, and we know something's going to stop us from achieving that, then that's getting in the way of you doing what you are there to do as a coach, and presumably what your client is there for you to do. So are you all working within what sort of government organisations? Does anybody here do paid work as a coach? Yeah. You've got private, so you've got private clients. So if you've got private clients as well, I mean that's what your clients are paying you for. They are paying you for your services, for your intellectual property, for your expertise, not just for your time while you sit there and listen to them explore their options or unlock their potential. You've got to do something to earn that client's investment in the process, and whether the client's investing in the process by paying you money or by engaging with their time. Their time is more valuable. You know, if they think the coaching is rubbish, you can give them a refund, but you can't ever give them their time back. So the investment they make in time is by far the most important and most valuable thing that they're going to give to you. And similarly for you, that's the most valuable thing that you're giving into the coaching relationship. And your development as a coach, and that's why you're here today, I guess. So problems are part of everyday life, and most of the problems that we come across, we don't even give a second thought to. So how many of you encountered any problems getting here today? What kind of problems did you encounter when you were here today? Traffic? So drivers?
Maybe you're behind it.
What else?
Getting out of bed.
Getting out of bed. Right. And yet, I have some evidence that tells me that you've overcome these problems, which is that you are here, I guess, and not in bed. So the fact that you are here means that, okay, there were some little obstacles, some things that were less than ideal, but actually you overcame that, and presumably there were some people who experienced insurmountable problems in getting here today, and the evidence for that is that they are not here. And so, for example, there are people who couldn't get time off work, or last minute some calamity came up and they couldn't get away from the office, or something at home, or whatever it might be. Or they didn't even book on the conference in the first place, and there were people whose problems prevented them from being here. And then there are many of you who've encountered some kind of problem in getting here. But you overcame it. And how did you overcome that? How did you, for example, overcome the problem of not wanting to get out of bed? So you made a decision. What you wanting to be here outweighed the. Yeah. Just be the pleasure of running away from the around. Right. So, as a coach, what is the thing that you do most of with your clients, would you say?
Listen.
Listen. And also, what else?
Questions.
Ask questions. So we could say that the coaching relationship is defined by the questions that you ask about, which is different to. So if any of you had a problem at work, and when you've gone home and talked about a problem you've had at work, your partner or your family or your friends or whoever it might be. They ask you lots of questions, but there are different type of questions than the questions you ask as a coach. Have you experienced this? So what kind of questions do your friends and family ask if you've got a problem at work?
Why did you let them get away with that?
Yeah. So lots of why questions, yes.
A leading or closed question, we tend to think.
Such as?
Did you think about this? Did you do that?
Right. Yeah.
So also quite loaded, aren't they? Emotion. Yeah.
Right.
So it makes me just want to go, shh.
Right, okay. And that's the issue, isn't it? It makes you want to go shut up. And therefore, no matter how well-intentioned or useful their questions or their advice may be, it can't hear it because there's that natural barrier, that critical filter in place that we all have, that we all acquire from a very early age. So around about the age that we start to create abstract maps of reality, round about the age that children start to figure out they can lie, or they have chocolate all around their face, they haven't figured out that that's a clue, that yes, they ate all the Christmas tree decorations or whatever it might be. I don't know any chocolate. How many of you got kids? So you've all seen this experience, this shift. If you've got kids, you've seen them go from, for example, being absolutely amazed, astonished at the game of peekaboo. And it's like, oh my God, where did she go? So, where did she come from? What on earth is going on? And then they go through a period where that stops working. When you hide, they look for you. Yes. And as a parent, that's kind of disappointing. But a number of things also start to happen around that same point. They start to navigate around the world. They start to build abstract maps, so they know where things are, even though they can't see them. So they know where, for example, the jar of biscuits is in the kitchen, even though you've hidden it. They still know where it is, and they know how to get to it. And they start to do things like have difficulty getting to sleep at night because their dreams become quite scary. And if you think about it from the kid's point of view, here you are in this room, and imagine that from here, you close your eyes, and when you open them again, you're on a fairground ride or at the seaside or whatever, and then you close your eyes and you open again, and you're back here. That would be disorienting. So if you've never dreamt before, and you've never created those abstract realities that your brain can hold as reality, that's quite disconcerting. So there's lots of things that happen in the development of the brain. And one of those things is, as I mentioned, we can create abstractions of reality. We can create scenarios and situations that don't exist in the real world. And that's how I would define a problem. It is a set of representations of reality that are organised in such a way that it stops you from achieving something. So, your reality this morning was traffic, or people driving slow, or bed's so cosy and it's so cold outside. That creates a reality in your mind that is as vivid, as tangible as this reality is right now, because what your brain is a simulator of reality. We can try out multiple scenarios. You've all done it before you've gone into a coaching session or maybe a conversation with your boss, and you've played out in your mind how that's going to go. And you thought, oh, what happens if they say this? I'll say this. What if they do this? And I'll do this. And what if this happens? And I'll do this. And then the one thing that when you get in there, the thing that happens is it's totally different to everything that you've sort of mentally rehearsed. But that ability that we have as humans to mentally rehearse is an application of our ability to create abstract realities. And that's what creates problems, because we start to imagine things that have not happened yet that prevent us getting to where we want to be. And there's lots of different ways that we have of working with that. And I'm going to show you one today. So it's a tool called the Unsticker, but you don't have to use the tool. It's just a random question generator, and that's something that you can do yourself as well, which I'll explain after you've done a couple of exercises, I think. So, as a coach, when you're asking questions, how do you know what to ask questions about?
By listening to the question.
By listening to them. There's the first mistake. So, as you will see. But listening to them for what? And how does that tell you what question to ask?
It's kind of some clues to what's important.
Okay, so clues for what's important.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Clues for desires,
Desires, yes.
inhibitors.
Inhibitors. So they're giving you information as they talk about whatever their situation is. And that information is giving you clues about what questions to ask. Perfect. Perfect. So let's try a little exercise. We've got a long number. So we'll have to try in a 3, I guess. So you can do it in 2s or 3s. What I want you to do is think about a problem that you currently have, and make it something genuine. So this isn't fabricated. Think about a genuine current problem that you've had. That you have maybe a dilemma. You don't know whether to go this way or that way, or you're wondering whether to take up an opportunity at work or not, or you can't decide where to go for your holidays this year. It doesn't have to be a big problem, but it has to be a genuine problem. Does that make sense? So when you think about that, I want you to turn to the person next to you, or get into a group of 3 if you like, and just give your partner or partners a précis, a headline, for no more than a minute of that problem. And what I want your partner or partners to do is listen to what they're telling you, with a view to giving advice. Because you know what it's like when you're talking about a problem to your friends and family, and they say, oh, what you want to do is, you've tried this and you've tried that. Because the very fact that you are describing a problem to somebody else must mean what? You want them to help. Otherwise, why would you be telling them? Very good. And what else?
It's important.
It's important.
You haven't got the solution yourself.
And you don't have the solution yourself. Excellent. Very good. So the very fact that you are describing a problem to somebody else must mean you haven't solved it and you want them to help you. So no wonder they start asking you questions to gather facts and information about the problem, so that they can tell you what to do about it. So I want you to have an experience of that first, because you've all spent so long coaching that you never give anybody advice anymore. I mean, you're so clean and precise with all your family and friends. But it's good to dip back into the old ways from time to time, just for a bit of contrast. So this will be our baseline. So does that make sense? So describe a problem for no more than a minute, and then your partner or partners will listen to the description, and they will ask you questions with a view to guiding you towards the solution that they've come up with, which is obvious to everybody apart from you. So, make sense? So I'll just give you a few 10 minutes total to... So what happened? What were you aware of as you were listening to the problem being described?
Lots of thoughts.
Yeah.
Already trying to solve it, already trying to make it my problem with my values, with my ideals. Well, if you just thought the same way as me, then why haven't you done it this way?
Okay, good. Yeah.
I was trying to relate.
Trying to relate, so you kind of put yourself into the story, right?
Yeah.
So, excellent. Good. What else did you?
Hearing what's around it. So listening to the problem,
Yeah.
and when somebody describes a small problem, kind of realising that it might be about something else that they're not touching on.
Right.
You can ask about.
Right. So hearing there was more of a story around what they were telling you. Okay, excellent. And at the end of that conversation, would you say that your problem is solved?
No.
No? Why is that?
I feel better about it. On purpose, yeah. They just hounded me. I didn't feel listened to.
Oh.
It's sad, isn't it?
Call themselves coaches as well. So, no, that was the baseline. That was your friend in the pub kind of conversation. And you've spent a lot of time, I guess, training and doing coaching training and reading lots of books and so on to get out of that habit, because you know that has its place, but if somebody's paying you with money or time to engage in the coaching process, that's not what they're looking for, because by definition they can get that at home. And therefore what you've got to do as a coach is add some value over and above that. The way that you do that is through the questions that you've learned to ask. So what kind of good coaching questions have you learned to ask during your coaching training and your practice that you've done? What would you say are good coaching questions?
There's always about sometimes opening it up. If I had a magic wand, what would good look like to you?
Okay. Yeah. What else?
What's the worst that could happen?
Okay, excellent.
Tell me what that looks like to you.
Yeah, what does it look like to you? Excellent. Good. So we recognise coaching questions, and and so have any of you had the experience of maybe early on in your coaching training helping a friend or a family member to figure out a problem and asking them a question like, so if I had a magic wand, then what would good look like? And then say, don't you be asking me coaching questions, or worse to that effect. Don't be doing your coaching with me, or whatever thing. Because as much as our clients are somehow paying to engage in the process, also our clients want to have an experience that's about them, isn't about you using a coaching technique that you've learned, or you asking them an off-the-shelf coaching question. Because as soon as we ask people off-the-shelf questions like that, as much as they're nice in the coaching practice scenario that you've been in on your training courses, as soon as you get into real life, we find people who haven't been on the training may not make the same sense of those sorts of questions. May not answer in the way that we expect them to. Have you had that experience when you were doing coaching practice early on, and then you got into doing coaching with real people and found, they don't react quite in the same way? Anybody found that?
It's a bit like when you learn to drive, isn't it? You learn to drive and you learn all the rules in the highway code. But then when you actually drive, hopefully some of that informs what you're doing, but you're not just applying the rules.
Yeah, and it's a baseline again, I think. You learn to drive on the assumption that everybody else on the roads follows the highway code.
Yeah, it's true.
And then when you pass your test, then you learn to do all the things that people do on top of the highway. That we could follow the highway code if it was absolutely necessary, like if there was a police car behind us. But otherwise, sorry?
We know better.
Yeah, because it's real life. They're adapted. Exactly. We know what to do, how to do it properly. So, when you are asking questions as a coach, have you worked on asking non-directive questions? Yes. Anybody sort of embraced a non-directive school of coaching or style of coaching? So what would be a non-directive coaching question?
They're actually very, very difficult, aren't they? Because you pour so much of yourself and your biases and thoughts and the fact that you already know what the solution is. It's very difficult to be non-directive.
Yeah. Anybody got examples of a non-directive coaching question? Tell me more about. Would that be a non-directive coaching question? Tell me more about, for example. Excellent. So what I would like to do is, second part of the comparison, the contrast, is carry on talking about your problem. But this time, what I want you, in the role of coach, to focus on is asking coaching questions. Maybe non-directive questions, but coaching questions, and see what progress you can make with solving the problem with some coaching questions. You're allowed to put on your very, very bestest coaching hat now and give that a go for a few minutes. Everybody okay with that? Let's see how that's different. So what did you notice was different about that compared to the first exercise you did?
Just a difference in the body language.
In what way?
More attentive.
Okay.
Quite quite subtle. I'm trying to describe it. More gentle, isn't it? Yeah, more inquisitive, more inquiring.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, but ask her.
Because I'm not comfortable giving advice. I didn't like the advice bit.
Okay.
The questions aren't judgmental, are they?
So the questions aren't judgmental. Okay, interesting. And what difference did that make for you?
I was more open.
Say the same. Yeah.
It's how to think more, basically. You don't just, there you go, you tell me. You have to rack your brains, and the first few solutions might come quite easily, but then as you drill down more and more and more, it becomes a lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting word you've mentioned there, which is solutions. And what I find is one of the most significant things that causes problems, especially in organisations, is the need to find solutions. And you'll hear people say something like, oh, I've got a good idea. No, you've got an idea. We don't know that it's good until after we've implemented it.
That's the thing for me about advice, is it's got emotional weight to it.
Yeah.
Whereas the second version doesn't have the same emotional weight attached to it.
Yeah. And when we become attached to finding a solution, if there's a solution, then that presupposes there must have been a problem. So actually the need to find solutions actually reinforces the problem.
It's also about not putting the judgment on the other person, but actually they need to find a solution. Because they need to come up to whatever they need to do.
Yes. And if you're listening to give advice, then what judgments are you implicitly making?
Yeah, but they need to do something. And you sense that when someone's giving you advice.
Yeah. And so if logically, if you are describing a problem to somebody, and they might conclude from that A, you don't know what to do about it, and B, you want them to help you, their logical inference from that is that you are stupid and you don't know what to do about it. So you are giving them facts so that they can solve the problem, so that they can tell you what to do. And that's what creates that, as you put it, that barrier, that resistance. And the cause of this fundamentally is that abstract map of reality, because from that early age when we develop that, our reality becomes fixed. But what we don't like, and what we'll develop a natural resistance to, is anybody trying to tell us that the world is different to how we think it is. And when that world, that reality, that representation contains a problem, then if somebody else tries to tell you what to do about that, your natural reaction will be to say things like what? Yes, but.
It won't work.
That won't work. I've tried that. You don't understand. It's not that easy. So what we learn is all these statements that deflect the advice for the purpose of protecting that reality, because if we don't protect our sense of reality, life becomes very unsettling and confusing. Has anybody had a relative who's had dementia or something like that? Yeah, my mother did. And something would, I'd bring something into the room, and she would comment repeatedly on where it came from. And each time, she would make up a different story about how it came to be there, none of which involved me putting it there. And so what we do is we take snapshots of reality and we make up a story about how that reality came to be. So you look around the room that you find yourself in and you think, how did I get here? And you make up a story about how you got here. And that story will either be, oh yeah, it was great, just got here and it was fine. Or the story will be, oh, it was a nightmare, stuck behind these slow drivers and the traffic was terrible, and oh, I thought it was going to be late. Neither of those stories is true, in that neither is a complete representation of what happened. But they are a story that you will tell to explain why you are where you are right now. And so when your client is describing a problem to you, they are not telling you the whole story. So when you ask a question like, tell me more, please tell me more a non-directive question.
Yes.
It's an extremely directive question. Because up until that point, they told you exactly what they wanted you to know. They haven't used a word too few or a word too many. They've told you exactly what they wanted you to know. So when you say tell me more, you're changing the subject. You're directing the nature of that and the direction of that conversation. Because you're deciding what they're going to talk about. Every time, as a coach or in any kind of walk of life, anytime you ask a question, you change the subject. Now they're talking about what you want to talk about. And even if you sit there after the coaching session and you do not say a word and you just let them talk, you're still directing through your very presence, through their very expectations of the relationship. Because what they say to you is different to what they would say to other people. And they will tell you exactly what they want you to know in order for them to achieve what they want from you. So when you think back over some of the coaching sessions that you've had, why do you think your clients were engaged in the coaching process? And by engaged, I mean physically present. What were they really looking to get out of it, do you think?
Validation.
Validation? What else?
I have a feeling sometimes that it's almost there's all the problems that I see in my life and you go right. Good luck.
Right.
Fix that lot for me.
Yeah.
Or you will fail me as a coach.
And in doing so, of course, I can't fix them either. In which case you are now.
Well, I said they were really difficult and challenging.
You were right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were right or not?
Colluding. Colluding.
Colluding. Yeah, making it normal.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, well if I was in your shoes, then I just totally understand. Yeah, of course. Nothing you can do.
No.
Yeah, how many, if you're coaching within the workplace, do you ever feel that even though you've made it explicit that the session is confidential, that the client thinks somehow what they talk about will get back to their boss? And therefore they will tell you things on that basis, that they want you to agree that it's all their boss's fault, so you can report back and again validate. So, do any of you ever have any clients who genuinely want help? How do you tell? How do you tell if somebody genuinely wants to fully engage in the process of the conversation? Yes, yeah, good. What else? What other clues do you get?
They're making progress.
Making progress. According to what measure?
According to their goals and their meaning.
Right, so they set goals or milestones and they come back and they're moving towards those.
Well, if you use the scenario we had, then yeah, you could monitor whether that person makes progress and ask them kind of positive questions around that. There's two things, isn't there? It's like, have you actually done it and has it made you feel different?
Yes, excellent. Good, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for somebody to help me demonstrate the Unsticker, although I will show you one other thing first that you might find useful in your coaching practice. I am recording it, so I only come up and help me out with the demo if you're happy with it. So, who has a problem that they will be happy to do a quick demo with me?
I'll do it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you. Millie, yes?
Yes,
Thank
well
you.
done.
Really Brambleby with two E's, as I recall.
A mini with two E's, yes, absolutely.
Two E's and two E's and Brambleby as well?
No, just a one.
Just one.
No, I have to justify the spelling of my name.
Yeah, I put two E's.
Yeah, sorry. I said a near approximation will do.
So, would you be happy to give me the headlines of a problem that you'd be happy to talk about for a few minutes?
Yeah, I'll use the same one that I was talking to Claire about.
Sure.
At the moment, my elderly uncle, who's always lived on his own, has been very, very poorly. And as a family, we're supporting him to move into sheltered accommodation. And normally in my family, my mother and father have been kind of the carers and the organisers for that whole family. My father's family is quite big. But now Dad's 84, Mum's 78, and they've decided that this time they'd like me to take on the responsibility of being George's, doing his power of attorney and organising stuff with the council. And I'm really delighted to do that, because I love him very much, and it's a joy to help him at the end of his life. And that's great. So my mother wants me to do it, but she doesn't really. So I'm getting quite a lot of interference, quite a lot of sarcastic comments, quite a lot of you shouldn't do it this way, quite a lot of glumness, and I'm finding that quite challenging.
So in all of that you just described, what exactly is it that's a problem for you?
What's a problem for me is that it feels to me as if me asking a question or making a suggestion is interpreted by my mother as me saying, you can't do this, you don't know. So if I say something like, I was a bit miffed to find that his walker wasn't in his room because they have a duty of care to make sure he doesn't fall, and he needs that so that he can get up and go to the loo on his own. My mother will respond with, well, I know they have a duty of care. I worked in social housing for many, many years. That's not what I was talking about. I was talking
almost
about...
as if what you said was, why didn't you make sure...
Why didn't you do something? Absolutely. Well, she wasn't there, she wasn't, And after 3 or 4 of those, you start to think, hang on a minute, what is it? So I've said to... Claire asked me very good questions. Have you talked to your mother about this? And I said to Mum, when I get a response like that, I'm sorry, Mum, I didn't mean to imply that you were lacking, you didn't do something. What is it that I said that made you feel that way? And I won't say it again. I then get, don't you talk to me like I'm one of your clients. I'm not one of your clients.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll just pause you right there. So we've already had an example of what I was going to demonstrate to you, a couple of examples actually. And it's, you can take it as a sign of the coach's the client's engagement in the conversation and the process. And it's I think it's a useful indicator. So it's a useful test of where you are with the client. It's a useful indicator of where this conversation is going to go and what direction you need to take it in as a coach in order for the client to get some value from it. Now, although obviously this is for the purposes of demonstration, when you're still engaged in this, expecting that this conversation is going to go somewhere. So although this is not a real scenario, it is of course a very real issue and is a very real person. So does anybody like to listen to the Radio 4 panel game in just a minute? Yeah, it was on last night as well. I've listened to it on the way down here. Does anybody know what the rules of just a minute are?
Hesitation, repetition, something else.
Yeah, so speak on a given subject for a minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition. So far, when I've asked questions, has Millie demonstrated hesitation, deviation or repetition?
Yes.
Which?
Repetition.
Repetition, yes. And also deviation, because she hasn't yet answered a question that I've asked her. Well, I've asked her, how is it a problem for her?
Yeah.
And what she told me was a story about something that happened, which isn't an answer to my question. So the very, very simple rule of thumb for you as coaches, that it's so easy to overlook, especially when you're thinking about the next question, and I've got to come up with a great question, or according to the ICF, I've got to come up with a powerful question. And you're so preoccupied with thinking about what your next question is going to be, you haven't noticed that they didn't answer the last question that you asked. And until you get an answer to that, there's not much point moving forwards. So I'll try again, we'll see what happens. How is all of that a problem for you?
Makes me really angry. And when I get angry, I think my mother's about the only person in the universe that can make me, that I lose my temper with. And then I feel out of control and ashamed of myself. And it undermines I think it undermines my view of myself as a coach and a mediator, which is really important to me.
Wow.
So it's quite fundamental stuff, I think. Did that answer the question this time?
Thank you. Checking. So was that hesitation, deviation, or
No.
she answered the question, and it's interesting to understand why she chose that moment to answer the question, and it was related to the deviation that she stuck right on the end of it.
It's really important.
It's important to her for what reason?
Because how it makes her feel.
Not just how it makes her feel, but yes, and therefore how it makes her look. And so she answered the question because suddenly she realises that she is demonstrating something as a coach and mediator, as she puts it, in front of you bunch of experts. And then she told us that at the end. So the deviation at the end was about how it makes her feel, and by implication look as a coach and mediator. And I say by implication look because coaching and mediation isn't something you can do by yourself. And therefore it involves other people, and therefore it involves all of us in this room. So, yes, we got an answer to the question, and then we got a little bit more that told us part of why this is important, although that isn't the real reason why it's important, but it's part of it.
If I tell you the real reason, I might cry.
Right, okay, so we know that, and we don't need to go into it. So, yes, I just wanted to demonstrate to you how easily and effortlessly the client will evade your questions, and how you won't even notice that they haven't answered your question. So be very, very careful with that. If you're going to go to the trouble of asking a question, and you've invested a lot of time and money in training, in learning how to ask these questions, so you don't just throw them away at bus stops and willy-nilly on people in a pub. These are special, valuable, important questions. You want to save them for best, right? So if you're going to go to the trouble of asking somebody a question, you damn well deserve an answer to that. And don't let the client off the hook until they do. And if they deviate, hesitate, deviate, or repeat, then ask yourself, why are they doing it? Why have they told me what they've told me instead of answering the question that I asked? However, what we're going to do is we're going to practice. In each of your packs, you've got a pocket version of the Unsticker. So there's a pocket version, which is that one, thank you. This, which is free. There's an online version, which is free. If you're lucky enough to have an Android phone, there's an Android version, which is free. And the books are £5 only because the books cost money to print, so I have no choice but to charge them. So the book's got the most questions in. But the most important thing isn't so much the questions, but it's the fact that I'm going to ask them randomly. So, what I'm going to do is ask you a series of questions.
Okay.
And you just say whatever you want to say that comes into your head. If you don't want to answer a question out loud, just nod when you're ready for the question.
Okay.
That's fine too. Entirely up to you. And we'll just keep going until something interesting happens.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yes, cool.
So thinking about what you just summed up the problem as, about getting angry and losing control, and also how this touches on you, on your professional abilities as well. What kind of fossil will this problem become?
What kind of fossil will it become?
Yeah.
I mean, how many fossils can one bring to one's mind? I think it's an ammonite. You know, when it goes round and round and round and round and round.
To that level.
Yeah, it's that little point in the middle.
Are you certain this is your problem?
No,
How cute is the problem?
it's not cute at all.
What would happen if you inflated the problem a little too much?
I think if I inflated it too much, it could do unrecoverable harm.
Okay. If you made your problem quieter, would you still be able to see it?
Yes.
If your problem was made into a movie, who would play the problem?
And a circus.
How would a gangster deal with the problem?
With a machine gun.
Is the problem left or right?
Left.
What would you do if things weren't the same?
I have less emotional fuel.
Is the problem like a tub or a lid?
It's a lid.
What are you stopping yourself from doing?
Accepting.
Imagine your favourite cartoon character has this problem. What is your advice to them?
Ask tenfold.
If you received a telesales call from this problem while you were eating your dinner, what would you say?
Hang up.
Does your problem enjoy going for a walk?
No.
Is the problem up or down?
It's up.
Is the problem available in other colours?
Yes, I think it is.
If you painted the problem black, who would mistake it for a part-worn coat on it? As you see yourself with that problem, what is interesting?
What's interesting is that I'm holding it like this, but I'm trying to do that. And that's actually quite an unnatural movement.
Okay. How does the problem sound backwards?
I don't like it backwards anymore than I like it forwards.
Can you think of a better question than this?
No.
How would a child play with the problem?
I suppose my nephew wouldn't play with it. He'd say, that's not important.
If the problem had a do not touch sign on it, would you?
No.
How many traffic cones would be needed to give the problem a contra?
I've obviously got a motoring aversion. Couldn't do the tyre either.
As you get to the end of this question, what do you notice about that problem?
That it hasn't been diminished or inflated by thinking about it.
What kind of batteries does your problem take?
AAA.
If you relax in a hot bath, how does the problem feel?
Like a ring on the doorbell.
How would you roll up the problem?
In a duvet, I think.
Hot dog, corn dog, what would a problem dog be like?
It would have a lot of pickle.
Is the problem better boiled, fried or sauteed?
Everything's better fried.
How does the phase of the moon affect this problem?
I don't think it has anything to do with the problem.
When do you want this to change?
As soon as I'm ready for it to change.
What can't you do?
Make my mother do anything.
And as you see yourself with that problem, what strikes you as funny?
What strikes me as funny is that, and it's funny peculiar, not funny ha ha, is that we've got 53 years of a loving relationship, and this is a tiny thing If you see it in that context of 53 years loving each other, this is a tiny thing, but it's so painful, and I can't quite work out why.
Okay, so what seems different now as a result of our conversation?
Talking about it helps. Talking about it to some 15 who aren't involved in it helps. Perspective-wise, helps.
What odd is that we haven't really talked about it.
I've talked about it in my head,
Right.
I think.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Emily? So what I would like to do is only ask questions now from the pocket and sticker. It's very important that you choose them randomly. If you look at a question and go, oh no, not that one, oh no, not that one, not that one, then what are you doing? Yes, and by selecting you're doing what? Directing, yes. You're also fitting the question to the problem. Yeah. So it's very important, just run your finger down and ask whatever question, or ask them in sequence, or ask them in reverse, or whatever. But do something that forces you to ask a random question. And as you could see there, I wasn't engaging with Millie, I wasn't doing anything with her answers. And I didn't need to listen to the information that she's giving me in order to ask the next question. I just needed to flick to a random page. And as I say, the free Android version will just generate the questions for you. So that's got 200. And there's a website version which looks exactly like that. And you can use it. So I don't know how many questions are on there, about 24 or something, I think. So that'll keep you going for a few minutes. Just randomly go through the questions. And keep an eye on your partner's emotional state. When you see a state change, that tells you that something has shifted in their internal representation of the problem, and that would be a good place for you to start. So if you see a state change, you can stop, you can get them to reflect on that if you like, and as I did with Mary, just what did she notice, what happened, what changed, that sort of thing. But do you have an experience of doing that both ways, or all three ways, if that's your thing? Okay, so same problem again, and just ask random questions until you can observe something change. What did you notice?
Visualise the problem. I visualise the problem.
You visualise the problem, okay, yeah.
I realised how small it was.
You realise what?
How small it was.
How small it was.
I think I looked at that and just started laughing in the big scheme of it.
Yeah, start to laugh at it. So you find that when you think about the problem now, something seems different about it than how it was before. So I created the Unsticker by accident to try and create an interactive coaching tool, and I accidentally created the Unsticker instead. And what I found was that the problem isn't real. Unless your problem is here, in this room right now, then it's made up of a collection of memories that are organised in a certain way that make them insurmountable as a barrier to getting something that you want, or to somewhere that you want to be. And that representation becomes real because of the way that our brain is able to create reality and simulations of reality. As a coach, no matter how good the questions are that you ask, your questions are always a response to what the client's told you. So your questions will always be constrained by what the client's told you about the problem and how the client represents the problem. They will give you their representation, you will interact with it as if they're describing reality, but they're not. And so if we ask questions about the problem or in relation to the problem, it doesn't matter how good those questions are, those questions will always be limited by the boundaries of the problem. When we ask random questions, by definition they cannot be related to the problem. And so what does the client do What did you find yourself doing as you hear what at first seems like a nonsensical question? How do you find an answer to that question?
You try and relate it.
Try and relate it, and what happened when you did that?
Well, you start thinking about the problem in a different way, and you start problem solving.
Yes. So if the coach fits the question to the problem becomes the constant. Now, if the coach asks a random question, and although the questions, some of them might make you smile or laugh, the structure of the questions changes the structure of the relationship to the problem. So, for example, some of the questions change the time frame around the problem. Some of the questions change your perspective, your relationship to the problem. Some of them introduce the possibility that the problem is one of many, or is in a category of one of many, like is it available in other colours. First you have to imagine that it has a colour, and it has other colours, and therefore it has other attributes that you've not yet looked at, and so on. So although the questions are presented in a way that's designed to get the client to smile, because that's a useful thing as well, fundamentally they all have a structure which changes the client's relationship with the components they put together as the problem. So instead of the client making the question fit the problem, the client has to change the way they think of the problem in order to make sense of the question. And the neat thing that I found is the client doesn't even have to answer it. They only have to hear the question. And they have to change the relationship of the problem in order to make sense of the question. They don't even have to answer it. Now, of course, as a coach, you can do this all by yourself. You don't need the Unsticker. You can, with a client, you can think up random questions. However, randomness is very unusual in humans. We are influenced by our environment in ways that we don't recognise. And so if you try and come up with random questions by yourself, the likelihood is those questions will be still bounded by the problem. So by all means write your own questions, but ask them randomly. What I've tried to show you today is that the value of departing from the traditional coaching model, the value of actually not listening to the client. Because they are telling you exactly what they want you to know, so that, for the most part, they stay where they are and have justification for that. As much as they say they want to change, and as much as that may be true, they also have lots of reasons for not. And anything that we can do to shake them loose from that and have a laugh about it is going to be, in my mind, a useful thing in the coaching process. So I hope that's been interesting and useful for you, a different perspective on coaching. I've got some unstickers and some other books. If anybody's interested in doing NLP training, I've got a newsletter sign-up form over there. There's one in the coffee room as well. And I will pick somebody at random to win a free place on NLP practitioner or master practitioner training that's coming up this year. So if you're interested in that, put down on the name in this form. If anybody's interested in books, let me know. Otherwise, it's been a tremendous pleasure meeting you all and working with you all today. Great lunch and a wonderful rest of the conference. Good luck.